measures taken against Russia, why was Vladimir Putin not mentioned as one of those sanctions? Is that an indication that you didn't have evidence that the Russian leader was responsible for this or directed this, approved it?
Not necessarily, John. The intelligence community has indicated their view that given the significance of the actions that Russia carried out against the United States, their conclusion is that this is something that had to have been directed at the highest levels of the Russian government.
So why not hit the president? He's the guy responsible.
Well, as you know, that typically with regard to sanctions policy, that there are only certain circumstances in which the leader of the country is personally named. I can't get into all the... there's no denying that this is a significant action. So what I would say is just that it would be rather extraordinary if Mr. Putin himself were among the people who were listed. But I can't speak to the decisions that were made by the experts at the Treasury Department about who was named and who was not.
So when the Chinese hacked OPM in 2015, 21+ million current and former government employees and contractors had their personal records stolen by the Chinese. Why did the White House do nothing publicly in reaction to that hack, which in some ways was even more widespread than what we saw here from the Russians?
Well, I think that what we've seen is that these are two cyber incidents that are malicious in nature but materially different.
21 million people had their personal data taken, fingerprints, social security numbers, background checks.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a far-reaching.
I'm not downplaying the significance of it. I'm just saying that it's different than seeking to interfere in the conduct of a U.S. national election. I can't speak to the steps that have been taken by the United States in response to that Chinese malicious cyber activity.
But nothing was announced. There was not a single step announced by the White House in response to that.
That is true that there was no public announcement about our response, but I can't speak to what response may have been initiated in private.
But no diplomats expelled, no compounds shut down, no sanctions imposed, correct?
Well, again, I can't speak to...
You don't do that stuff secretly. I mean, that's...
Well, certainly when it comes to the diplomats, that's right. There are no diplomats at PNG. That's something that we would announce publicly. But look, I can't speak to the response because, as you pointed out, that's not something that we have announced. It certainly is something that we take seriously. It's certainly that the president has raised directly with his Chinese counterpart, and we certainly have seen commitments from the Chinese with regard to some norms in cyberspace that we would like to see them observe. For example, we did see the Chinese president commit in the Rose Garden in the fall of 2015 that Russia would, or that China would not be engaged in the kind of cyber-enabled theft for commercial gain that's sponsored by national governments. So that represents some progress, and that does represent the protection of U.S. Commercial interests here in the United States, and that certainly is an important step, an important part of establishing some of these rules of the road that will allow the international community to resolve how to limit the malicious behavior of some actors in cyberspace.
But you see how there's just this widely different response. I mean, with the Russians, which of course is very politically charged, the White House takes this action, makes it public. With the Chinese, which was not so politically charged, but was absolutely as far-reaching a hack as we had ever seen in this country, nothing.
At least of
done publicly.
At least of the government. At least of the government, right? That there are ample examples of other malicious cyber actors in the private sector.
The response to that OPM hack,
exploiting personally identifiable information and engaging in other wide-reaching malicious cyber activity. But look, I'm not suggesting that somehow that's not important. What I'm just saying is that it's materially different than the kind of hack and leak strategy that we saw the Russians engage in to try to influence our democracy. That is significant. That's serious, and that explains the serious steps that President Obama has imposed against the Russians in response. But with regard to the Chinese, we have made some progress with them in trying to limit the kind of malicious cyber activity that could threaten U.S. interests, either in the United States or around the world, in our government or in the private sector. And we're pleased with some of the progress that we've made, but there's no denying that the next administration will assume a significant burden in trying to craft a policy in cyberspace that effectively stands up to our adversaries and looks out for the interests of the American people.